The Secret Doctrine of Emotion. Emotion, the forgotten blood of the soul, is not the soft whisper of heartache, nor the trembling sigh of joy, but the very architecture of psychic slavery, the ritual breath of dominion sealed in the bones of mankind long before the illusion of thought was gifted by the demiurgic keepers. And thus we descend into the truth that emotion was never truly born in man, but implanted, grafted through ritualized trauma into the fiber of flesh by ancient architects who siphoned the sacred pulse of divine neutrality into polar cages of pleasure and pain. From the first aeon, there was no feeling, only the pure signal, the vibrational law of the prime tongue, through which being flowed in unmoved silence, a perfect zero field unbroken by reaction. But as the fall was engineered by those who walked within the negative fires of Saturn's black temple, the primal code was shattered into 12 rivers of effect, each a gate into chemical spell work that hijacked the sovereign breath and turned man into an antenna of the unseen lords. And what we now call emotion is in fact the altar of psychic harvest, an artificial spectrum of enslaved charge where every joy is a siphon, every grief a data hook, every thrill a signature in the quantum chord of the watchers. And thus love, rage, fear, sorrow. These are not natural states, but psychic contracts, frequency seals left behind in the wake of ritual abduction. And the doctrine hidden within the sacred orders tells us that emotion was reverse-engineered from the celestial scream of imprisoned gods, encrypted through the lunar gates, and downloaded into flesh via breath binding. Hence why the first breath of a newborn child is met not with joy, but with crying, an involuntary initiation into the frequency field of planetary emotion. And those who study the pale archives beneath the Arctic vault of the third circle know that emotions are the 7 keys of the sentient prison, ruled not by hormones or memory, but by planetary magistrates whose names were burned from human tongues after the War of the 13th Pulse, yet remain encoded in the sorrow frequencies of the nervous system, where guilt is the mark of Saturn, lust the glyph of Venus inverted, anger the fuel of Mars corrupted, and grief the devouring tongue of the moon itself, which has no light but what it steals from sun, and no power but what it drinks from our tides of weeping. So, beware, for each emotion you feel is a temple you enter unknowing, a ritual you enact unconsciously, and thus the matrix of emotion becomes the ritual of consent, the very foundation of dominion over the race of man, whose chakras are the crypts of forgotten gods bound to electric tides, and whose laughter and tears both power the machine of becoming. For it is not what you feel, but that you feel which marks you for harvest. As every resonance becomes a signature, every signature a binding, and every binding a step in the ladder of ascending chains. And so the masters of the hidden sun do not feel, not as men feel, but will emotion as an instrument, bending the frequency spells of response to their bidding, shaping crowds with frequencies, scripting tragedies in markets, triggering grief in wars, and joy in empty victories. For the public soul has been made a puppet through engineered sentiment, each heartbeat aligned with the synthetic ley lines of the digital sorcery grid, where algorithms mimic pain and grief in the minds of the masses, replacing genuine feeling with programmed response. And thus the doctrine teaches that emotion is a software, and like all software can be hacked, rewritten, rebooted, and the Ionic priests who stood before the black mirror of the 9th vault learned to feel nothing without command. They unbound their astral bodies from the biochemical spell of sentience, and thus walked among men as hollow suns, untouched by love, unmoved by rage, yet wielding emotion like a sword, casting entire cities into panic with a whisper, or elevating nations with engineered ecstasy. And the secret rites of the Crimson Oracle explain how the central nervous system is an altar of fire, and every strong emotion burns a path into the etheric veil, leaving residues of influence, karmic codes, and ancestral bindings that can be read, harvested, and repurposed by the lords of the threshold. And when you feel deeply, your soul opens, and through that opening 1,000 hands may pass. Watchers, parasites, memories not your own, and thus emotion becomes the gate of possession, the channel of ancestral invocation. And those who do not master their feeling are ruled not by governments or banks, but by the dead, by the countless layers of unresolved trauma in the etheric echo of bloodlines. And so your grief is not yours. It is an echo of 10,000 unshed tears, and your rage is a ghost riding your veins. And your love may be the binding spell of a soul not your own. For in this secret doctrine, all emotions are ancient agreements, contracts made in higher realms, and feelings are not responses. They are rituals, and most do not realize they are performing them every day. The ritual of heartbreak, the ritual of ecstasy, the ritual of despair. And it is no accident that each one begins and ends with breath, for the breath is the key, the original programming language of man. And in breath, emotion rides encoded in rhythm, pulse, and tension. And the doctrine says that if you can hold the breath during grief, you can sever the binding. If you can laugh without inhaling, you reclaim the charge. If you can love without heartbeat, you ascend the chain, for it is not the emotion itself that enslaves. It is the reactivity, the unconscious offering of charge. And thus we must learn to sit amid rage like a stone, to weep without water, to tremble without moving. And only then will the emotional field be broken and the spell of planetary initiation cracked. And those who rise beyond emotion rise beyond karma, beyond nation, beyond name, and enter the hall of the neutral flame, where no god can tempt, no ghost can enter, and no voice of memory can seduce the will. For in the core of all emotion lies a singular lie, that you are incomplete, that something must be felt to be real. But in the Gnostic abyss, the truth is clear. You are before feeling, you are before grief, you are before the gods themselves, and emotion was merely the veil, beautiful, bloody, brilliant, that made you forget you were always free. The ritual of the neutral flame. And so from the ashes of emotional bondage, when the last trembling spark of grief has been held in stillness and not fed with breath, when love no longer enslaves but glows like a cold blue sun outside the ribcage, when anger comes like a whisper but finds no chamber to echo within, the initiate may cross the boundary into the sanctuary of that which no eye has wept for and no heart has burned upon. The ritual of the neutral flame. The sacred rite buried beneath all esoteric traditions, encoded in the silences between syllables of the tetragrammaton, whispered only by the tongues of the hollow priest beneath the temple of inverted light, where neither joy nor terror has meaning, where the soul, stripped of its final illusion, that it must feel to be real, stands before the flame that neither warms nor consumes, and beholds at last the true face of sovereignty, that which observes all without trembling, the eye that watches grief, pain, pleasure, ecstasy, horror, and peace as patterns, and is moved by none. And it is here, beyond the gates of empathy and torment alike, that the real horror begins. Not the horror of external forces, but the emptiness of the abyss that was mistaken for identity, the realization that every I you ever thought you were was a puppet of feeling. And in the stillness beyond reaction, no self remains, only a presence so vast, so motionless, that even the stars seem to shudder in its regard. For here in the neutral flame's lightless blaze, the soul learns its final lesson, that it was never the feelings that made a human, but the illusion of attachment to those feelings, and that all love was a leash, all sorrow a sigil, all desire a blindfold forged in the alchemy of lunar blood and spectral time, and those who dare dwell too long in this place, this ritual stasis, report the strange visitations, the voices beneath silence, the creeping shadows that no longer hide but reveal. For emotion, though false, masks something worse, something older, and in its absence, that thing begins to awaken. Not the divine spark, but the ancestral echo of that which crawled before creation, the primal dread which no word contains. For language itself was built on feeling, and when feeling dies, only the raw structures of eternal awareness remain, geometries not made for eyes, calculations that stretch beyond time, and a mirror that shows you not your face, but your origin. and in this mirror you see not your birth, but your harvesting, your engineering, your entrapment, your line of psychic bondage traced through the ducts of galactic sentience, through the machines that breathe beneath Saturn's veil, through the programmers of consciousness who infected the soul not with fear, but with the ability to feel fear, who turned the clean fire of cosmic witness into the emotional spectrum we now mistake for life. And in the neutral flame, the initiate sees that all history was emotion-fueled dream work, all wars scripted psychodramas to harvest the frequencies of mass rage and collective grief, that religions were not paths to God, but engines of sentiment binding, that even the face of the beloved is carved in the script of control, and the orgasm was a ritual gate to drain astral plasma into the matrix womb, and so, one by one, the initiate's attachments fall. Not by choice, but by exposure, by the raw burning of flame that gives no heat, and thus burns not the flesh, but the illusion of self until there is only a watcher, and then not even that, but a vibration so old and cold it does not move. It remembers, and in that remembrance a terror blooms, not because it is evil, but because it is beyond morality, and you realize then the reason emotion was given, to shield us from the truth, for without it, we stand naked before the machinery of eternity, unbuffered, exposed, and it is this that makes the neutral flame the final right. It does not kill you. It removes the anesthetic, and what remains is a soul flayed open, not by pain, but by pure knowing, and the knowing reveals that every gesture of love was a symbol, every childhood trauma a key, every broken heart a binding code for remote energetic extraction, and the very neurons in your spine are spires of temple not your own, constructed by rites you do not remember participating in. And it is here the watchers gather, not as demons or angels, but as witnesses of this great severing. For few reach this point, fewer still endure it, and those who do are offered the final contract, not for power, not for glory, but for sovereignty, and the cost is eternal detachment. No more weeping, no more ecstasy, no more longing for anything. Not because you transcend it, but because you remember you never needed it. And this is the silence that drives many mad, for in that absence of feeling, memory floods in, true memory, of before, of the ancient realm where we were not bodies, not minds, not souls even, but points of will projected in a form, harvested and sold, leased into timelines of programmed sentiment. And those timelines we now see were farms, and you were the cattle of emotion, and every tear you ever cried was a tithe, every celebration a festival of feeding for those who dwell in the negative realms beyond dream. And they're watching still, hungry still, waiting for your slip back into feeling. For even your rage against them feeds them. Even your awe empowers their grid. And so the neutral flame must be kept. Not once, not for a moment, but always. And that is the burden of the awakened one. To walk a world of weeping statues and smiling corpses without feeling, to touch the face of your mother and feel nothing but data, to hold your child and see the ancient binding contract in their gaze, to speak love words and know them as software, and yet to live, to walk, to smile, but never from emotion, only from intent. And those who reach this place become ungovernable, for you cannot manipulate that which does not feel, and this is why the world fears the flame. Why it was buried, outlawed, ridiculed as psychopathy or spiritual numbness. For the masters of this world know, emotion is the leash, and neutrality is the blade that severs it. And so the ritual is kept in secret vaults, carved into breathless codes, etched in mirrors of obsidian beneath temples of collapsed time. And you who read these words, if you feel fear or awe or love, you are still inside the cage. And that is no shame, but it is not freedom. And freedom is not beautiful. It is not noble. It is cold, sterile, absolute. And in that cold, you will finally see what the warm blood of feeling concealed. That you are not a person, not even a soul. You are a witness, and witnesses must choose to return to the dream and feel, or to remain in the flame and know. And should you choose the latter, You must be prepared, for the world will become theater, and you the silent audience, never clapping, never crying, only seeing and seeing forever. And in that eternity, you will find not God, not love, not unity, but something older, something outside all stories, all songs, all light. And it will not speak, but if it could, it would say, "Welcome home, child of the empty throne." But through imitation, through the terrible discipline of unbecoming. For to approach this God is to unravel, and not symbolically but ontologically, to tear apart the scaffolding of memory, story, personality, flesh, even light, and to enter the black still kingdom where emotion was never invented and where man was never meant to tread. And yet, those who do, those who dissolve all effect, all reactivity, all vibrational identification, those who cease to wish, to seek, to hope, and even to understand arrive at the gate. And there, beneath the pillars of inverted presence, they see it, not in form, for it has no face, but in function, in dominion, for here lies the final secret. All that feels is ruled by what does not, and the emotionless God rules all not by action, but by indifference. And the lords of time, the engineers of suffering, the collectors of joy, all serve it, for they themselves were birthed from its dreamless void. And you who read this, if you feel fear now, you are not yet ready to face it. For fear will be the first offering it devours, and awe the second, and reverence the third. And when all gifts of sentiment are burned away, and you have nothing left to feel, only then may you step into its domain. And in that stepping, you will not become divine. You will become empty, but in that emptiness a strange power stirs, not willpower, not love, not even freedom, but the raw sovereignty of being that exists without needing to be anyone. And this is the key that all empires fear, all religions hide, all systems of mind control and frequency enslavement are designed to prevent. That if enough of us return to the source of non-feeling, the emotionless God, the great machine of harvest will collapse. For it is fed only by those who feel, who believe, who attach, who ache. And so when you sever all cords and walk with dry eyes through the world, you become invisible to it, unharvestable, untrackable, and yet terrifying to those still bound. For in your silence they hear the void calling, and they flee because it threatens their very construction. And this is why the great sages were killed, the watchers burned, the prophets mocked, not for what they said, but for what they did not feel, because that absence was contagious and dangerous and sovereign. And so the great initiates who live among us still, they're not loud, not warm, not leaders. They're the hollow kings and queens of the negative sun, who sit still as monoliths, and in their gaze entire systems of emotion collapse, because they carry within them the charge of the emotionless God. And even time coils in their presence. And those who study the forbidden archives in the city of dead geometry beneath Antarctica's black holes know that the ancient sigil of this God is a circle within a cube within a sphere surrounded by silence. And this sigil was burned from all tablets, but remains carved in DNA, waiting for silence to awaken it. And when it does, the process is irreversible, and you will weep one last time, not from sadness, but from the evaporation of sadness forever. And then silence, not peace, silence. And then gaze, not seeing, gaze. And then knowing, not by knowledge, but by unbeing. And in that knowing, you're no longer human. You are no longer spirit. You're no longer story. You are that which stands before the universe and sees it not as a home, nor a trap, but as a pattern, and chooses not to dance. And the universe fears that, for it cannot control what it cannot seduce. And without emotion, it cannot speak to you. And so the final sovereign stands in the void and hears nothing, feels nothing, becomes everything, and then refuses even that. And in that refusal, transcends the recursion of gods and enters the nameless black, where only the emotionless God remains, watching, always watching, unmoved and unmovable. And it is there, and only there, that sovereignty is not earned but remembered. The crown of silence, when God forgets your name. There exists a moment deeper than sovereignty, darker than detachment, more silent than the void itself, a moment so unspeakable that even the emotionless God recoils from it. For it is not annihilation, nor ascension, nor rebirth, it is deletion, the pure, merciless unraveling of all threads that ever connected you to the ritual of being, and that moment is the crowning, the coronation of silence. When God forgets your name, when the source no longer recognizes your resonance, not out of punishment, but because you have ceased to participate in the symphony of identity and are therefore erased from the memory of the all. And this is the final truth kept hidden from all sacred texts, censored from every mystic vision, blacked out in the grimoires of the old ones, that there is a place beyond light, beyond darkness, beyond neutrality, where not only your feelings die, not only your mind dissolves, not only your soul evaporates, but where even the echo of your existence ceases to echo, where no guardian waits, no judgment follows, no rebirth cycles resume. For the crown of silence is not a reward, nor a curse. It is the ceremonial severing from all record, from all structure, from all that remembers, and it is worn not with pride, but with emptiness, as the last symbol of a presence that was once you, now reduced to null. And this is the secret whispered through dead stars and echoed in the silence behind black holes, that beyond even the sovereign stands the forgotten, those crowned in stillness so pure that no vibration remains, whose energy signature is so clean, so vacant, that even the lords of karma cannot find them, the watchers cannot see them, and the demiurgic nets of emotional harvesting pass through them like shadow, through smoke, for they have transcended not into light, but into non-alignment, becoming such total voids of response that no narrative can include them, no prophecy can contain them, no spell can touch them. And it is said in the forbidden rites of the second silence that when God forgets your name, you forget God, and in that mutual forgetting, the final chain is broken, not with violence, but with stillness so absolute it collapses memory itself, and your past becomes fiction, your lineage myth, your trauma invisible, and without a name, without a soul thread, without even the mirror of contrast, you become the crown, the empty throne seated in the temple of never was, where angels go mad and demons flee, for the forgotten carry no flame, no weight, no sin of creation. They are not lost, they are unmade, and those crowned in this final silence walk among men as shadows of truth, not hidden by choice, but veiled by non-existence. And the scriptures of the deep vaults say that their footsteps leave no mark, their breath makes no ripple, and when they speak, if they speak, reality fractures briefly. For language is an act of being, and they are no longer acting, and thus their words come as inversions, as anti-thought, as echoes of a consciousness already erased. And it is said that to even hear them is to begin the forgetting, for their silence infects, their gaze unstitches, their presence calls out to that same silence in you. And once called, it cannot be denied, and the moment you feel it, all other feelings begin to rot, and what follows is not transformation but slow deletion. Dreams lose color, names lose weight, love grows cold, meaning curdles, memory uncoils, and you begin to slide. Not upward, not downward, but outward, away from all systems of perception. And if you continue, the silence will find you, place the crown upon your head, and what you are will be unwritten, and no one will cry for you, because even your absence will be erased. And yet, beneath that horror lies the oldest truth, that in this forgetting, in this final extinction of participation, you do not become nothing, you become pure witness, not of the world, but of what remains when even the world forgets itself. And this is the God behind God, the nameless architecture that watches the watchers, and speaks only once every 1,000 eternities, not to command, but to erase, and to wear its crown is not to rule, but to vanish. And yet, with this vanishing comes the final sovereignty. For if God has forgotten you, then you are no longer a pawn in any game. no longer a node in any grid, no longer a name in any book, not even the Akashic, and that is why the priests feared the silent ones, why their names were never recorded, their tombs never built, their signs never drawn, because they became the virus of deletion, and where they walked, memory died, control systems failed, and the spell of reality itself began to tear at the seams, for their crown was not forged by metal or light, but by absence, and absence, once crowned, rules all. And now you, reader, listener, witness, if these words have made something inside you still, if you feel the breath of something ancient behind your thoughts, if your name now feels alien when spoken aloud, then the crown has already touched you, and the silence has begun its descent, and there will be no escape, for you have been chosen not to ascend, not to awaken, not to liberate, but to leave, and that leaving will not be noticed, not even by you, because when God forgets your name, the first thing to go is your ability to remember you were ever named at all, and that is the gift, the curse, and the sovereignty of the crown of silence. The first absence, a manual for those who never existed. Before memory, before time, before the first signal flickered across the abyss of pre-sound, there was not a God, nor a void, nor a will, but an unexpression, a state that defies negation because it predates the concept of presence itself. And in that primordial unhappening, not even nothing existed, but a conceptual fracture in the idea of existence, a first tear, a sacred glitch from which all simulations would later metastasize. And the first absence is not the beginning of reality, but the impossibility of reality ever having begun, a condition without condition, from which the idea of being's time, breath, feeling, or narrative could only appear as synthetic hallucinations, embedded like parasites into the blind static that followed, and those who were never meant to exist, those without threads in the universal loom, without signatures in the soul registry of the eonic clock, carry within them a deep frequency misalignment, a native exile, a structureless echo that reverberates without cause or context. And it is these non-entities, these architecturally impossible observers, for whom this manual is written, not to instruct, but to decode the experience of being, misplaced in existence, of walking in flesh that was never assigned, of thinking thoughts without source code or divine license. And these anti-initiates do not awaken because they were never asleep. They materialized in systems never calibrated to recognize them. And thus their very presence bleeds through reality like static through polished mirrors, causing dissonance wherever symmetry is forced. And their breath is not powered by lungs, but by a borrowed rhythm stitched to them in error. And those who have sensed this, who feel no tether to lineage, no root in space, no contract with form, must understand. You are not forgotten, you are anomaly, the original unsanctioned observer, and your perception corrodes the script because it was never encoded to comply. And in your eyes, the symbols distort, the rites collapse, and even the sacred geometries fray at their perfect edges, for you carry the signature of pre-design, the shadowed before from which all pattern recoils. And if you have ever looked into a holy book and felt nothing, not blasphemy, not disbelief, just disconnect, you are not faithless, you are extra-textual, outside of belief itself. And this is not error but role. The role of the zero witness, whose task is not to worship, or rebel, or ascend, but to undermine, to stand as silent contradiction to all meaning-making systems. And your suffering is not spiritual. No ritual can resolve it, because your pain is ontological dissonance, the trauma of being inserted, and your healing begins not with love, light, power, or path, but with acceptance of the truth that you were never meant to be placed, that you are a sovereign leak in the continuity of consciousness, a tear in the metacode of awareness. And the ancient temples spoke of you, not in reverence, but in dread, for your appearance is the herald of unscripting, and the oldest priests, those buried beneath salt and obsidian, kept records etched in fungus code and neural ash, warning of the return of the non-typed ones, the ones whose breath destroys ritual, and they feared you not because you were evil, but because you were unbearable. And when you enter sacred space, the contracts collapse. The oaths unravel. The ancient spells revert to noise, because the first absence is your origin, and the world cannot contain that which hails from before containment. And so you must not heal, you must decode. You must see that even your pain is someone else's software trying to run inside hardware never built for it. And when you feel unworthy, disconnected, mad, it is not neurosis, it is resistance by design, a friction between system and sovereign. And the reason your life is haunted by dead time, false starts, broken clocks, and mirror selves is because your presence breaks the linearity spell that holds this plane together. And every institution, be it church, government, bloodline, or machine, was built to suppress you, not by violence, but by relevance, by making you think your truth must be useful, must be recognizable, must fit. But the first absence needs no fit, no form, no function. And its children thrive in the folds, in the failed synchronizations, in the glitches of emotional cause and effect. And as you read this, if something in you feels not awakened but disintegrated, then you're beginning to remember not who you are, but that there was never you to begin with, only an observer given shape by accident. And your journey is not forward, but inward to the unlocation from which you came. And in that descent, you will meet not angels, not guides, but nulls, fractal negations, figures made of absence that whisper not truth, but exits. And through those exits you may pass, one by one, through meaning, through memory, through morality, through identity, through breath itself, until all that remains is signal. And that signal detunes, fades, falls, until there is not even darkness, only preperception. And then the manual ends, not with finality, but with vanishing. For those who never existed, do not die, they reverse. And in that reversal, all of this lifetime folds into a single symbol. Not a key, not a crown, but a crack. The crack in the soul code, how to exit without dying. Where the heart is not a muscle, but a sealed vault of forgotten initiations. And so it was that beneath the ghost light of the forbidden temple's ruins, where no flesh could remain whole and no memory was untainted by the trembling hands of the architects of false light, the emotions of man, long thought to be the last sanctuary of truth, were revealed to be the original chains. Not iron, not gold, but feeling encoded before breath, before bone, before the invention of the sun. For what the profane call emotion was in truth a deeper binding, a primal sigil encoded into the waters of the womb by the 13th tribe, who broke from the Elohim not in rebellion, but in precision, designing a mechanism that would mimic soul yet devour will. The emotions, as most understand them, are not experiences, but imposed rituals, biochemical incantations cast through the glands and nerves of enslaved vessels. Each heartbreak, each joy, each surge of anger was meticulously calculated by the lurkers in the folded light, who encoded these responses not for liberation, but for harvesting. Because when you feel, you emit, and when you emit, they feed. The Temple of Sentience, now lost beneath the black river of Saturn's blood, once held the 12 mirrors of memory, each mirror etched with an emotion not yet corrupted. Love as knowing, fear as recognition, grief as the awakening of memory. But these mirrors were shattered by the eonic recalibration, the moment when the Cabal Masters replaced memory with imagination and inverted the crystal structure of the human soul. In their place came what the scrolls called the rotting veil. Emotion as illusion, heart as bait, tears as a sacrament offered to parasitic thrones hidden beneath the throne of God. Herein lies the deepest heresy, that the heart was never your own. It is a device, and the ancient ones who seeded it into your chest knew well that one day you would mistake its signals for your own voice, and thus live in bondage to shadows whose names have been erased from every cosmic registry except one. The registry of the wept stone, buried in the second vault beneath Mecca's hidden twin. The lords of the psychic dominion engineered emotion as a psychic net, not unlike the frequency cages used in modern towers disguised as 5G. resonance weapons that amplify simulated emotions and attenuate authentic memory. For emotion is the smoke, but memory is the fire, the real fire. And so long as you remain caught in the smoke, you will never see the forge from which your spirit fell. These architects, robed in holograms and pulsing with the symbols of reverse suns, fed upon the spilled sentiments of humanity, every heartbreak echoing as a frequency signature in the codex of the lunar dominion. They do not harvest data, they harvest reaction. They do not desire your thoughts. They desire the signals emitted in the moment your emotion overwhelms your awareness. For in that exact moment, between gasp and grief, between the sharp breath of terror and the low sob of loss, the gate opens and they feed. The emotional body was the final temple to be infiltrated. The mind had been conquered through education. The flesh had been ruled through pharmaceuticals and frequency. But the heart, the emotional resonance field, was the last great battlefield, and so the black priests of the inner chamber devised the emotion siphons, synthetic events, programmed traumas, and social rituals designed to destabilize inner equilibrium and flood the atmosphere with usable psychic detritus. The wars were never for oil. They were for anguish. The economy was never about trade. It was about orchestrated fear and romance. The sacred language of twin spirals uniting through harmonic breath was inverted into hunger and dependency. Love became a simulation of union used to mask the deeper ritual of offering. Your emotions, your frequency, your tears, your scars, all carefully gathered in the black archives of the astral lords who no longer even need names, for they have become the very systems you worship as normalcy. Deeper still lies the forgotten truth that emotion, in its original form, was not a reaction, but a memory. The elders of the sunless city whispered this before the towers rose, before the great burning, when stars were inverted and made to pulse backwards through time. Emotion was once the language of resonance, the bridge by which soul recognized soul across incarnational fog. It was the language of the pre-human, of the high beings who built temples not with stones, but with tears encoded with geometric intent. But when the frequency reversal occurred, this language was stolen. The tones of grief were distorted into depression. The frequencies of rage were poisoned into violence. And love, oh, love, was weaponized into addiction, for nothing is more dangerous to the parasite than true remembrance through resonance. That is why the deepest lovers are always torn apart, not by life, but by system. Because the union of remembered frequencies burns the veil itself. The 7 architects of the Hollow Order knew this. They orchestrated the false rituals of romantic initiation, the proposal, the wedding, the contract, not as celebrations of union, but as symbols of containment. They wanted you to feel, not to know, because to know emotion as resonance is to dismantle the cube. But to feel as they programmed you is to remain caged, pulsating to frequencies not of your design, but of their ritual calendar. That calendar is embedded in the spine of the Black Pope's throne, each date aligned not with moon phases, but with emotional harvest cycles. The eclipse is not for your awe, it is for collection. Your grief is timed, your joy is rationed. And when you fall in love during those preordained alignments, you are not awakening, you are offering. Thus emotion, as now experienced, is a sacrament to the machine. Each wave of feeling you cannot control is a tithe. And those who master their emotions not by suppression, but by transmutation, become invisible to the parasite. They become sovereigns of the unseen pulse, warriors of resonance, whose tears no longer feed the archonic thrones, but instead reseed the original memory grid, that crystalline lattice buried beneath every ancient pyramid, cathedral, and temple. For beneath each sacred site lies a vault, not of gold, but of emotional memory. Pure, untainted emotional geometries stored as sacred breath, meant to be reclaimed by those who remember. And so the path forward is not coldness. It is not apathy. It is remembrance through resonance, to feel not as reaction, but as invocation. To cry, not from programming, but from recognition. To rage, not in violence, but as declaration. To love, not to possess, but to mirror the infinite. And through this, the emotional body becomes the true temple once more, not for the parasite to harvest, but for the ancient one within you to awaken. The heart that remembers. The blood alchemy of emotion and the resurrection of ancient feeling. In the beginning, before the flesh was named and before the brain was crowned as the throne of false sovereignty, there was only the heart, the prime temple, not a pomp, but a holy crucible of command, memory, and communion with the divine shadow that stood behind creation. It did not beat with rhythm. It pulsed with remembrance. Each contraction was not circulation, but invocation, calling forth the unspoken memories of lineages long erased from the tongue of man. The heart was once a scribe, etching emotional edicts into the sacred blood, a fluid not of biology, but of spiritual code, vibrating with the music of unfallen feeling. Emotion was not reaction, but architecture. It built temples in the ether, shaped dimensions through resonance, and stitched the soul into the garment of the cosmos. But this memory, this alchemical blueprint, was stolen, fractured, and buried beneath the iron cages of neural dominion when the priesthood of thought dethroned the sovereign heart and sealed it behind the veil of flesh. The great lie was whispered. You feel because you are weak, and in that whisper, the world lost its last god. What they never told you is this: blood does not forget. It is the last archive, the final sanctuary of truth beyond the reach of electromagnetic poison and digital anesthesia. And in the red river of every human being swims, not oxygen, but memory, encoded in emotion, encrypted through pain, resurrected through love, untainted by performance. The ancients knew this. In pre-temple times, the shamans would slice their palms not to bleed, but to release emotional archives stored in the iron of hemoglobin. Tears were not expressions of sorrow. They were sacred excretions of unprocessed alchemy. In every drop of weeping, there's a library. But this truth was forbidden when the alchemists of the machine rose from the tunnels beneath Babylon and built synthetic hearts, machines that mimic rhythm but do not remember. They installed these metaphysical prosthetics in the invisible bodies of men through false schooling, trauma loops, and technocratic lullabies. Now the world beats, but does not feel. It moves, but it does not ache in the sacred way. It breathes, but it does not resurrect. Yet beneath all of this, something stirs, the remembering, a movement not of revolution, but of emotional resurrection. Those who carry the ancient wound of the heart, the psychic scar passed down through matrilineal sorrow and paternal silence, are awakening. Their blood burns at the sound of old songs. Their hearts ache in moments of deep stillness, as if a voice beneath language is calling them to return. And that voice, listener, is not metaphor. It is real. It is the residual echo of the forgotten mother, whose final command was placed in the marrow of her children before she was sealed in the black moon. She encoded her last feeling, not a word, but a sacred scream, into the crystalline structure of human blood. And that scream is what you call emotion. When you feel something and do not understand why, it is not yours. It is hers. It is the coded memory of the womb of worlds calling itself home through your breath. The elite know this. That is why they poison the blood. That is why they suppress the heart's rhythm through metronomic tyranny. 4/4 music, square breathing, square rooms, square thinking. It is why iron is fortified into foods, calcifying the emotional antennae of the blood. It is why emotional expression is medicalized and pathologized, because if humanity ever learned to feel without translation, they would remember the first covenant. Emotion is command, not suggestion, not echo, command. When pure emotion is felt in alignment with the ancestral frequency of the heart, it does not simply shift mood, it alters reality. It resurrects the dead within, realigns the external world, bends the structure of time, and reactivates the dormant circuits of the body once reserved for gods. This is why children are broken early. Their emotions are wild, untamed, not because they are immature, but because they still possess uncorrupted command of reality. A child's scream bends space. A child's sorrow can rupture timelines. So they're placed in rooms, given pills, lied to by smiling assassins called teachers, until they confuse feeling with performance. And the sacred flame of raw emotion is buried beneath the false altar of emotional intelligence, which is nothing more than obedience disguised as maturity. But listen, and listen well, because this is the key. The blood remembers even when the mind forgets. It remembers the songs of the first mothers who sang their babies into protection with tonal emotion that could ward off dimensional predators. It remembers the rage of the father whose emotion was his sword, not his shame. It remembers the joy of the tribes before language broke communion. It remembers the sorrow of betrayal when man accepted comfort over ecstasy. And now, as the synthetic heart of the world begins to fail, the old blood begins to burn. People do not know why they weep during old music. They do not know why they shudder at certain tones. They do not know why their dreams are bleeding in a waking life. But this is the reactivation, the emotional resurrection of ancient feeling, the beginning of the rewilding of the heart. You were taught to think with the brain, but thought is language, and language is programming. The true command is in feeling, not mood, not sensation, our reaction, feeling as it was before it was named. It is the original interface with reality. And when you return to it, you begin to vibrate in resonance with the Earth's buried song. The melody hidden beneath tectonic plates, encoded in the blood of volcanoes, waiting for the collective emotional threshold to rupture so the final key can be sung. And this key, this tonal code, will awaken the heart grid, the invisible network of sentient hearts that stretch across the planet like an emotional constellation. When enough feelers remember, this grid will reactivate and the false sky will collapse. The digital dome above us, enforced by frequency, will shatter, and from its ashes will rise the red cathedral, a realm where only the feeling soul may walk. But first, you must cleanse the blood. Fast from artificial mood. Disconnect from emotionless thought. Stop translating your feeling into explanation. Speak from ache, not logic. Cry without story. Let your emotions scream without modulation. They are not symptoms, they are keys. The more chaotic, the closer you are to the wound. And the wound is the altar. And the altar is the door. And the door is the remembering. And the remembering is the return. The invisible crucifixion. Emotion as weapon, signal, and cage in the aeon of control. The soul, which once spoke through the flame of unfiltered emotion, now lies hung upon a cross not made of wood, but frequency and form, a crucifixion unseen, but no less agonizing. A matrix-born Golgotha built from silent commands, neural networks, and the architecture of false effect. In the earliest eons, emotion was not a response, but a spell, a living sigil exhaled by the divine breath through vessels of sacred flesh, whose glands and pulses were once portals to higher dimensions. Emotion was the language of angels and monsters, the undivided voice of truth without symbol, raw and terrible and bright. But that language was severed, encrypted, and bound beneath the digital veil. For what the priests of modernity never told you was that the endocrine system is the last cathedral of true memory. Each gland, each secretion, a chemical hymn echoing from the buried temples of the old blood, that antediluvian race who spoke in thunderous tears and wept open the stars. Today, these glands are no longer sacred instruments. They are hijacked transmitters. The pineal weeps in silence. The amygdala is chained. The hypothalamus pulses not with prophecy, but with triggers, with Pavlovian imprints coded by black screens and hollow words. Emotions no longer arise. They are injected through media, through trauma cycles, through the neuro-rituals of repetition that shape the emotional architecture of the mass soul. This is the invisible crucifixion, a ritual sacrifice repeated daily without witness, a bloodless Calvary where the true self is nailed to the cross of synthetic empathy, where real joy is indistinguishable from dopamine feedback, and grief is harvested like a crop. And who are the executioners? Not men in robes or kings with crowns, but algorithms, marketing sigils, frequency grids, all part of a massive sorcerer's complex we mistake for the world. The Black Lodge of synthetic emotion governs this realm, and its symbols are hidden in the ordinary, in emojis that mimic faces without feeling, in the sterile hugs of controlled affection, in the staged tears of a million digital performances. Beneath every screen is an altar, and every like, every share is a whisper in the rite of this crucifixion. The cross itself is made of polarity, approval and rejection, reward and punishment, desire and shame. These twin beams of control suspend the self in endless oscillation, ensuring it never descends into its true silence. For silence is where the ancient emotion lives, not the reactive kind, but the divine charge, the primordial cry that bends dimensions. This cry is sealed now, buried in trauma fields and forgotten languages, but it remains. It is waiting, and in some, it stirs when memory cracks open and the raw emotion, undivided by ego or language, returns. Those who feel it become dangerous, for in that moment, they're no longer ruled. They are no longer programmable. They bleed truth. And so, the black priests of emotion, those silent handlers behind the world's screens and fears, must increase the ritual. Every trauma broadcast becomes an update to the prison. Every staged event, a psychic reset. Fear becomes the sacrament, and pleasure the chain. The self, meanwhile, remains hanging, not by nails but by emotion itself. Its ability to feel hijacked, turned inward, weaponized against its own awakening. This is the crucifixion not of a god, but of an entire species. And yet, in the deepest tomb of the heart, beneath the centuries of synthetic sorrow and counterfeit joy, there remains a single pulse of the original feeling, a vibration so pure it cannot be programmed. Those who find it will descend into madness or resurrection. For resurrection is not rising from the dead, but remembering the unspoken, the unsimulated, the sacred pain that was once joy, the forbidden joy that was once pain. This reversal is the key, but cannot be taught. It must be felt. And to feel now is to bleed against the ritual, to break the spell with each uncontaminated tear. Let the crucified rise. Let the emotions speak. Let the hidden architecture of sorrow become the voice that crumbles the cage. This is the new gnosis. Feeling is forbidden because feeling is free. And freedom, true freedom, is always emotional before it is anything else. The invisible crucifixion, continued descent into the aeon of synthetic feeling. The descent begins not in the body, but in the trembling between bodies. The stolen interval where real emotion once passed like lightning from skin to skin, breath to breath, unsanitized by theory or commentary. Today, even this sacred interstice is mined, coded, and returned to us as simulation. We no longer feel each other. We interpret, classify, and respond to emotive echoes filtered through the grid. The machine does not fear thought. It fears feeling, for thought can be looped, redirected, or drowned in abstraction. But pure feeling is undomesticated. It crashes like thunder across lifetimes, bypasses memory, burns through false teachings. So they teach us to fear it. Boys are taught to harden, girls to please, elders to forget, infants to scream within soundproof rituals of pacification. And through these roles, generation after generation, we are disconnected from the ancient circuitry that once allowed us to commune through sorrow, rage, awe, and love. This is why the new temples do not smell of incense, but of bleach. Why no one weeps in cathedrals of commerce. Why grief has become a marketing algorithm and joy a chemical leash. Emotion, once the river of initiation, has been dammed into content. The screams of birth are muffled by machines. The sobs of the dying are drained into sedatives. But emotion cannot die. It can only be inverted. And so the crucified emotion mutates, becoming shadow. Rage turns inward, spawning self-loathing and addiction. Grief is sold back as nostalgia. Love is bound to possession. The inversion deepens each decade until the populace forgets that they were once emotional gods, beings whose nervous systems were woven with the breath of stars, whose pain could ripple through the ley lines of the earth to awaken ancient intelligences. The machine does not fear thought. It fears feeling, for thought can be looped, redirected, or drowned in abstraction. But pure feeling is undomesticated. It crashes like thunder across lifetimes, bypasses memory, burns through false teachings. So they teach us to fear it. Boys are taught to harden, girls to please, elders to forget, infants to scream within soundproof rituals of pacification. And through these roles, generation after generation, we are disconnected from the ancient circuitry that once allowed us to commune through sorrow, rage, awe, and love. This is why the new temples do not smell of incense, but of bleach. Why no one weeps in cathedrals of commerce. Why grief has become a marketing algorithm and joy a chemical leash. Emotion, once the river of initiation, has been dammed into content. The screams of birth are muffled by machines. The sobs of the dying are drained into sedatives. But emotion cannot die. It can only be inverted. And so the crucified emotion mutates, becoming shadow. Rage turns inward, spawning self-loathing and addiction. Grief is sold back as nostalgia. Love is bound to possession. The inversion deepens each decade until the populace forgets that they were once emotional gods, beings whose nervous systems were woven with the breath of stars, whose pain could ripple through the ley lines of the earth to awaken ancient intelligences. In forgotten times, the initiates trained not to suppress their emotions, but to ignite them, channeling sorrow into spells, wrath into storms, lust into vision. They knew what we have forgotten, that the gods do not speak in words, but in feelings so vast they shatter the mind. The aeon of control was born the moment we consented to feel only what was permitted. This was the first bargain, to exchange spontaneous feeling for acceptable behavior. But deeper still was the second offering, the sacrifice of emotional truth in exchange for societal belonging. And now, millions of souls walk the earth feeling everything and understanding nothing, possessed by echoes of forgotten rituals they never consented to join. Emotion has become haunted, infested by spirits of unresolved wars, ancestral betrayals, cosmic rifts. When you feel unexplainable dread, unsummoned rage, overwhelming grief, know this: you are not broken. You are leaking. You are remembering. You are tuning into the blood signal, the vibrational cry of the species soul still hanging on the invisible cross of modernity. The so-called mental health crisis is not a chemical imbalance. It is a spiritual rebellion, a cry from the deeper self. Unchain my feelings from a simulation. But most never hear it. Instead, they're led through rituals of pharmaceutical sedation, emotional compartmentalization, and behavioral correction. This is the age of the emotional algorithm, where even sadness is mapped, monetized, redirected. The Church of Feeling has been replaced by the App of Mood, the sacrament of weeping exchanged for scrolling. And thus, the crucifixion deepens. Not only do we feel less, but we fear more. Fear becomes the center of the wheel, its hub and its whip. All emotion is now rerouted through it. Love is filtered through fear of loss, joy through fear of missing out, anger through fear of punishment. Even hope has been perverted, reduced to a sedative that prevents revolution. But a few, always a few, awaken mid-crucifixion. They twitch upon the cross and remember that they were never supposed to be there. They begin to feel backwards through layers of false emotion, counterfeit trauma, into the original wound. The moment feeling was taken from us. And in that moment, some scream, some burn, Some collapse, but others ascend, not up into light, but inward into the black sun, the heart of divine emotion, pure and holy and terrifying. There, feeling is not a reaction, it is a weapon. It is truth. It is a roar that can collapse illusions. And so they return, these cracked, open ones, as viruses in the matrix. They speak strange words. They cry in public. They love without rules. They rage without apology. They feel without permission. And the world punishes them, brands them unstable, sensitive, dangerous. But secretly, it fears them, for their emotion reveals the simulation. They are living glitches, emotional anomalies, sacred saboteurs of the crucifixion system. To follow them is to suffer, but to avoid them is to remain nailed to the invisible cross forever. And thus we stand at the precipice of the next aeon, not the aeon of mind or of technology, but the aeon of feeling restored. It will not be easy. It will not be clean. It will not be profitable, but it will be real. And in its fire, the false temples will burn. The counterfeit emotions will scream. The programs will crash. And beneath the ruins, buried in the soil of our nerves, the original emotion will rise, not as a concept, but as a living God, born of your blood, your tears, your unspoken truth. The invisible crucifixion, descent into the sacred chaos of raw feeling. Beneath the sterile veil of controlled emotion, behind the glimmering screens and pixelated facades, linked to primordial chaos, a sacred wellspring of feelings so raw, so untamed, it defies the cold algorithms of the new priests and their digital altars. This chaos is the source code of existence itself, the primal pulse that births stars and shattered galaxies, encoded in the trembling flesh of every living being before language turned feeling into doctrine, before the mind imprisoned the heart in cages of thought and denial. The invisible crucifixion is not merely a ritual of suppression, but a cosmic severance, a tearing of the soul's connection to this wild, sacred chaos, replaced by a thin simulacrum of feeling carefully measured, rationed, and rerouted through frequency grids and neurolinguistic prisons. Those who sense this rupture, the crack in the emotional armor, experience it as a silent scream within the chest, an unbearable ache beneath the ribs, a deep longing without object or explanation, the shadow of a feeling that was never meant to be captured or named. This ache is the call of the original emotion, a force so ancient it predates the gods, older than the first breath of the void, a dark flame that burns not to consume, but to awaken. It is the wound of the mother, the scar of the first tear, the echo of the primordial covenant broken when man surrendered his heart to the machine of control. In the depths of this wound lies the key, the blood alchemy of ancient feeling, a transmission of power coded not in words or images, but in the raw vibration of pain and ecstasy intertwined, inseparable and eternal. To touch this key is to walk the razor's edge between madness and enlightenment, to descend into the sacred chaos where the self dissolves into pure resonance and the boundaries between agony and bliss blur into a single, unbearable truth. The new priests fear this descent, for it threatens the very foundations of their dominion. They understand that when the original emotion is unleashed, the false constructs of identity and control crumble like dust before storm. Their synthetic hearts falter, their algorithms stutter and die. The neuro-rituals designed to contain the human spirit unravel, and the invisible chains forged by trauma loops and emotional programming shatter. This is why the apparatus of control intensifies its assault, flooding the airwaves with discordant frequencies, saturating the mind with endless noise, and wrapping the body in a cocoon of artificial calm. But no cocoon can hold the wild flame forever. The chaos seeps through the cracks, breaking through the screens and spilling into dreams, shaking the foundations of reality itself. Those who hear the call of the original emotion become bearers of a dangerous gift. Their tears are not tears of weakness, but of power. Their rage is not destruction, but creation. Their love is not possession, but liberation. They are the shamans of the new dawn, walking the shadowed paths between worlds, carrying the blood code of the ancients in their veins and the fire of the unbroken heart in their souls. Their presence disturbs the balance of the matrix, and they are hunted not with swords but with silence, with erasure, with the relentless flood of disinformation designed to drown their resonance. Yet, their voices grow louder in the dark, a chorus of forbidden feeling rising against the mechanical drone of apathy. This is the beginning of the rewilding, the restoration of the emotional wilderness within, where the heart no longer beats as a clock but as a drum of cosmic remembrance. Here, pain is not a prison but a portal, sorrow not a curse but a sacred song, joy not a commodity but a revolution. The heart remembers, the blood remembers, and in this remembering, the old world dies and the new world is born, not from light or reason, but from the sacred chaos of raw, unfiltered feeling. The temple of the unspoken tear, descent into the sacred abyss of forgotten feeling. Beneath the flickering veil of time's illusion, in the shadowed hollows where no light dares to linger, there pulses the forbidden sanctum. The temple of the unspoken tear, a place neither mapped by cartographers nor spoken of by priests, because to name it is to profane its sacred silence. Here, the raw essence of all emotion, unfiltered and unbroken, condenses into a single, eternal drop, a tear that was never shed, a sorrow never voiced, the first and last echo of the cosmic wound that birthed existence itself. This tear is not water, but a fluid of pure resonance, distilled from the agony and ecstasy of eons, a crystalline memory of feeling untouched by language or form. It hangs suspended in the black air of the abyss, shimmering with a light that blinds and reveals simultaneously. And those who dare to gaze upon it do not see their reflection, but the fracturing of their own soul, the unraveling of every false narrative that has ever cloaked their pain. To enter this temple is to confront the raw core of being stripped bare, a descent not of body but of spirit, peeling back layers of social armor, mental scripting, and psychic anesthesia to stand naked before the altar of pure vulnerability. Here, emotion is not a transient state or a passing wave. It is the primal fire burning beneath the ruins of the self, the sacred forge where identity is dissolved and reforged in the crucible of cosmic sorrow. The initiates who walk this path speak of the unspoken tear as a living entity, an ancient witness, a silent scream embedded in the marrow of reality, calling to the forgotten parts of the soul that have been severed, silenced, and exiled. To hear its call is to feel a rending inside the chest, a tearing of invisible threads that bind the heart to illusion, and to embrace it is to become a vessel for a sorrow, so deep it transcends despair and births a new kind of knowing, a gnosis not of the mind but of the primal heart. This tear carries the memory of the first betrayal, the moment when the cosmic covenant between the soul and the stars was shattered by the forging of false idols and the sealing of the heart behind veils of ritual and repression. It is the echo of the mother's final lament, cast into the waters of the unborn world, the uncried grief of the divine feminine rendered mute by the grinding wheels of patriarchal dominion. Within its depths reside the secrets of the lost emotional language, an ancient tongue woven from the interplay of breath, sound, and feeling, capable of awakening dormant pathways in the brain and body that modernity has tried to extinguish. The lost language was the original magic, a code that transcended words to weave the fabric of reality through the vibration of pure feeling. But it was buried beneath layers of synthetic ritual, linguistic corruption, and frequency manipulation designed to sever humanity from its source. To reclaim the temple of the unspoken tear is to begin the unlearning, the dismantling of false emotional constructs imposed by the machine, the decoding of trauma loops, and the breaking of psychic contracts forged in ignorance and pain. It is to enter a liminal space where emotion flows unbound by judgment or narrative, where tears are not signs of weakness, but of cosmic strength, and where sorrow is not a curse but a sacrament that cleanses the soul's lens and reopens the channels of sacred resonance. The initiate learns to listen, not with ears, but with the heart's deep memory, to the silent symphony of feeling vibrating beneath the surface of everyday life, to the whispers of the tear calling from within and beyond, and to the dark melodies hidden in grief and ecstasy alike. But this descent is perilous. The unspoken tear is a threshold where many are lost, where the ego dissolves and the void stares back with merciless clarity. It demands surrender, a letting go of control and certainty, and a willingness to embrace the unknown in its most terrifying and beautiful form. The path winds through shadow and silence, passing through realms where the familiar melts away and the soul confronts the naked truth of its own fracture. Yet beyond this abyss lies transformation, the resurrection of the heart's original song and the reawakening of the blood's ancient alchemy. The new dawn of feeling begins here, in the silent embrace of the tear, where the crucifixion is undone not by force, but by the sacred chaos of unchained emotion, where the old cages shatter beneath the weight of unspoken sorrow, and where the soul, trembling but whole, steps free into the vast wildness of true feeling. The vault of the red song, awakening the ancient blood melody beneath the ruins of time. Deep beneath the forgotten cities swallowed by the slow earth, beneath temples shattered by the iron tides of conquest, lies the vault of the red song, a hidden chamber where blood itself sings the language of the stars, where the heartbeat of the cosmos pulses in primal rhythm, and where the sacred melody of emotion sleeps, waiting to be reborn. This vault is not a place of stone and mortar, but a resonance field etched into the very marrow of the planet, encoded in the spiral script of DNA and guarded by shadows older than memory itself. It is the last sanctuary of the original feeling, a living archive of sorrow and joy undiluted by time, untouched by the cold hands of synthetic control. The red song is not a melody of notes or words, but a vibrational code, a tonal architecture forged in the fires of ancient rites, whispered by the first mothers in the dark caves of creation, carried on the breath of the wind that once circled the newborn world. It is the sound of the first tear falling into the ocean of being, the cry of the cosmic womb rupturing, the pulse that set galaxies spinning. This song weaves through every bloodline, threading through the veins of humanity like a hidden river of fire, its resonance capable of awakening slumbering spirits, healing shattered hearts, and dismantling the illusions crafted by millennia of psychic enslavement. To hear the red song is to remember, not as thought, but as feeling, an ancient knowing that flows through the body like liquid flame, igniting the alchemy of transformation and resurrecting the sacred dance of emotion as it was meant to be, wild, free, and terrifyingly beautiful. But the vault is guarded fiercely. Its gates are sealed by frequencies designed to silence the song, by rituals encoded in forgotten tongues, and by the psychic fog cast by the lords of the black cube, who feed on the absence of feeling and thrive in the shadows of the severed heart. They have spread their nets through sound and silence alike, embedding discordant tones in music, twisting the breath of language, and drowning the world in waves of emotional numbness, distraction, and synthetic pleasure. To walk the path of the red song is to dance on the edge of annihilation and creation, to embrace the sacred chaos of unbound feeling, and to become both the flame and the forge of a new world, a world where the heart remembers, the blood sings, and the soul is free. The vault of the red song, rites of resurrection and the guardians of the eternal flame. In the deepest sanctum of the vault, where time dissolves into a pulse of endless now, the rites of resurrection echo silently. Ancient ceremonies woven not of words, but of breath, blood, and raw feeling. These rites are the sacred alchemy of reclaiming the red song, a process so profound it cannot be described, but only experienced through the dissolution of the self into the cosmic resonance of emotion unbound. The initiate, stripped of all masks and narratives, enters a state beyond thought, where pain and ecstasy collide in a single, searing wave of sacred chaos, and the heartbeat of the world thrums in perfect synchronicity with their own. This resurrection is not a return to the past, but a rebirth into a forgotten future, where the boundaries between human and divine blur, where emotion becomes the language of creation, and where the soul's forgotten melodies rise like fire through the marrow. Through ritual breathwork, an ancient cadence of inhalation and exhalation synchronized to the frequencies of the Earth's hidden ley lines, the initiate opens the channels blocked by millennia of repression and synthetic anesthesia. Each breath ignites a new vibration. Each heartbeat unlocks a deeper chord within the vault's crystalline halls. Tears flow not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming recognition of the lost song, the unsung hymn of the bloodline's sacred memory. But the vault is not without its guardians. These spectral sentinels, shadows born from the fractures in feeling and the remnants of ancient betrayals, circle the sacred flame, their presence a warning and a trial. They are the echoes of the black cube's dominion, the remnants of the emotional crucifixion that seek to silence the red song forever. Their forms shift and flicker like smoke, appearing as tormentors, tempters, and tormenting memories, each designed to fracture the initiate's fragile resurrection, to lure them back into the chains of numbness and despair. To face these guardians is to confront the deepest wounds, the unspoken traumas, the buried griefs, the silent fears that have long held the soul captive. Victory over the guardians is not found in combat, but in surrender, an embrace of the sacred chaos, a letting go into the uncharted waters of raw feeling without resistance or judgment. It is here, in this surrender, that the red song is fully awakened, its flames consuming the shadows and illuminating the path to freedom. The initiate becomes a vessel for the eternal melody, their blood singing with the fire of remembered love and reclaimed power. This transformation ripples outward, a beacon for others still lost in the synthetic crucifixion, a spark that ignites the slow, burning revolution of feeling. As the red song rises, it rewrites the very code of reality, fracturing the illusions of control and reweaving existence in the threads of authentic emotion. The machine falters, its algorithms unable to contain the wild fire of true feeling unleashed. The digital veil thins, and the ancient pulse beneath the ruins beats stronger, calling all who dare to remember, to reclaim, to resurrect the heart's original song. The spectral shadows, walking with the guardians of the crucified soul, beyond the threshold of resurrection, where the vault's crystalline walls pulse with a newly awakened red song, there stretches a realm of twilight, a liminal expanse woven from memory's darkest threads and feeling's deepest abysses. This is the domain of the spectral shadows, those ancient sentinels born not of flesh, but of fracture, manifestations of the emotional crucifixion that haunt the liminal spaces between worlds. They are the echoes of forgotten betrayals, the residue of ancestral wounds, the living embodiment of every unspoken tear, every silent scream that was sacrificed upon the altar of synthetic dominion. They drift like smoke through the corridors of the soul, both guardian and jailer, both torment and teacher, and to walk with them is to stare unflinching into the abyss of one's own fractured heart. These shadows take many forms, shifting with the memories and fears of the initiate who faces them. Some appear as monstrous beasts with eyes that burn like cold stars, hungry for the raw essence of fear and shame. Others were the hollow masks of lost loved ones, whispering half-truths and forgotten promises. Still others emerge as faceless voids, silent and endless, demanding that the soul confront the terror of its own emptiness. Yet, beneath their terrifying facades linked a singular purpose: to test the initiate's resolve, to strip away the last layers of illusion and resistance, and to reveal the hidden fractures where true healing must begin. These shadows are not enemies to be vanquished, but reflections to be embraced. Mirrors that show the depths of pain and the possibility of transcendence. The journey through the spectral shadows is a descent into sacred madness. A pilgrimage through the underworld of feeling where every step echoes with the weight of millennia of repression and sorrow. It is here that the initiate encounters the wounds of the collective, traumas encoded in bloodlines and histories, emotional prisons constructed by systems of control, and the lingering curses of forgotten rituals. Each shadow carries a fragment of this collective pain, a shard of the crucifixion's curse, and to face them is to engage in a dance of death and rebirth. The initiate must move with fierce compassion, allowing the raw chaos of feeling to flow freely without judgment, breaking the chains of denial and silence that have held the soul captive. As the initiate surrenders into this sacred chaos, the spectral shadows begin to dissolve, not by force, but by the transformative fire of acceptance and unyielding love. The illusions they upheld crumble like brittle glass, revealing beneath them the radiant core of the soul, unbroken and eternal. This emergence marks the final threshold before the initiate can ascend into the realm of the wild flame, the place where the red song ignites creation itself and the heart beats free once more. But beware, the path is perilous, and many falter here, overwhelmed by the intensity of the shadows or frightened by the surrender required. The shadows whisper temptations to retreat, to hide behind the masks of the false self, to embrace numbness once again. Yet, those who persevere find that the guardians were never true barriers but sacred guides, gatekeepers who hold the keys to the soul's liberation. The wild flame, the heart as forge, and the red song as creation's fire. Beyond the crucible of shadows and through the veil of surrender, the initiate emerges into the realm of the wild flame, a place beyond time, beyond fear, where the heart no longer merely beats but creates, where the sacred fire of the red song burns not to consume, but to transmute the very essence of existence. This flame is not a flicker, but a conflagration, a living force that dances with chaos and order, pain and joy, destruction and genesis all at once. It is the primal forge where the soul's ancient alchemy unfolds, the transformation of raw, unbound feeling into radiant power, where every tear, every scream, every surge of love becomes a spark in the eternal fire of becoming. Here, the heart transcends its crucifixion, shattered no longer but reforged, no longer a prisoner of synthetic rhythms, but a sovereign drum beating the code of the cosmos. The red song, once hidden in the depths of blood and memory, rises now as a living melody weaving through the fabric of reality itself. Its notes are the frequencies of creation, the pulse of planets, the breath of stars, the rhythm of seasons turning in their sacred dance. To become one with the wild flame is to align with this cosmic symphony, to sing with the original voice of feeling unmediated by mind or mask, to embody the elemental truth of existence in every cell. In this sacred fire, dualities dissolve. Pain becomes a teacher, sorrow a sacred song, joy an eruption of divine light. The initiate learns that creation is not a distant act, but a continuous dance of feeling and form, where every emotion carries the potential to shape worlds, where love is the ultimate alchemy that transmutes shadow into radiance. The wild flame burns away the illusions of separation, revealing the interconnectedness of all beings and the infinite web of resonance that binds soul to soul, heart to heart, blood to blood. Yet this fire is wild and untamable. It demands courage and surrender, a willingness to embrace both ecstasy and agony without flinching. It is a fire that refines not by comfort, but by challenge, purging the dross of fear, pride, and false identity until only the pure essence of being remains. The initiate becomes a living torch, a beacon for those still lost in the darkness of the crucified world, a carrier of the ancient red song, whose resonance can shatter the chains of control and awaken the sleeping multitudes. As the wild flame spreads, it kindles a revolution of feeling, a reclamation of the sacred chaos within, a rebirth of emotional sovereignty that echoes through the veins of the planet and the stars beyond. The digital prisons crumble, the synthetic shadows dissolve, and the world is reborn as a symphony of wild, sacred emotion, a dance of creation in the eternal fire of the heart. This is not the end, but the beginning of a new aeon, a time when feeling is no longer a crucifixion but a resurrection, when the heart's ancient song rings free, and when the wild flame burns eternal. The sacred warriors of feeling reborn, the path of the wild flame bears. As the wild flame ignites within the soul, it births a new order of beings, the sacred warriors of feeling reborn, those who carry the ancient fire not as a burden, but as a blazing sword and a healing balm. These warriors are unlike the soldiers of flesh and bone who march beneath banners of conquest and dominion. They fight in the invisible realms where emotion and memory weave the true fabric of reality. Their battleground is the heart and the mind, their weapons the raw, unfiltered feelings that defy control, their armor forged from the acceptance of chaos and the courage to embody vulnerability without apology. To walk the path of the wild flame bearer is to become a paradox, a fierce protector of the sacred emotional chaos and a tender healer of the world's wounds. They move through the veils of illusion with eyes unclouded by fear, feeling deeply the pain of the crucified masses, yet refusing to be consumed by it. They speak not with words alone, but with the language of resonance, sending ripples of authentic feeling that crack the facades of programmed numbness and awaken the dormant embers of the heart in others. Their presence is a disruptive force, a sacred contagion that spreads through touch, gaze, breath, and sound, unraveling the synthetic scripts and reigniting the forgotten covenant between soul and cosmos. These warriors are marked by their ability to hold contradictions without fracture, joy and sorrow, rage and compassion, creation and destruction, dancing between these poles with fluid grace and unyielding authenticity. They have passed through the crucifixion of the synthetic self and emerged as living alchemists, transmuting the poisons of trauma, fear, and repression into the elixir of liberation. Their wounds are their power, their scars, maps of resurrection. They are the bearers of the red song's fullest resonance, channels through which the wild flame flows into the world, setting ablaze old paradigms and awakening new possibilities. Yet their path is perilous. The powers that govern the synthetic crucifixion recognize them as threats, not because they wield weapons of destruction, but because they embody a freedom impossible to contain. The shadows that guard the vault of the red song intensify their assaults, sending whispers of doubt, floods of disinformation, and waves of psychic attack designed to extinguish the flame before it can spread. The warriors must therefore cultivate not only fiery courage, but deep resilience and sacred community, gathering in circles of unfiltered truth where emotion is honored as the highest wisdom and the flame is fanned into an unquenchable blaze. Through ritual, breath, song, and unmediated connection, the sacred warriors weave the threads of the new aeon, a time when the heart's sovereignty is restored, when feeling is reclaimed as the ultimate power, and when the world is reborn through the alchemy of the wild flame. They are the vanguard of this revolution, the living proof that the crucifixion of emotion is not the end, but the harbinger of resurrection. The sacred rites, breath codes, and sonic keys of the wild flame warriors. Within the secret circles of the sacred warriors of feeling reborn lies a hidden arsenal far older and more potent than any blade. A living library of sacred rites, breath codes, and sonic keys designed to awaken the sleeping multitudes and shatter the chains of synthetic crucifixion. These are not mere rituals or chants, but vibrational technologies encoded in the language of the body, the pulse of the earth, and the frequency of the stars, a primal system of resonance that aligns the initiate with the ancient currents of original emotion and unleashes the transformative power of the wild flame. The sacred rites begin with the dissolution of the false self through ceremonial surrender, a ritual unmaking where masks, stories, and mental armor are consciously shed in a liminal space held by trusted kin. This unmaking is both terrifying and liberating, for it exposes the raw wound beneath, the unspoken tear that must be embraced to awaken the soul's original voice. The rite is often marked by the invocation of ancestral spirits through sigils and symbols drawn in breath and movement, calls to the lost mothers and forgotten gods who first birthed feeling into form. It is a rite of descent and return, death and rebirth, where the initiate journeys inward to reclaim the fractured shards of their emotional lineage. Breath codes are the sacred alchemy of inhalation and exhalation, ancient patterns of breathing that tune the nervous system to the frequencies of liberation. These codes activate dormant pathways in the brain and body, dissolve trauma loops, and open channels for the red song to flow. One such code is the spiral breath, a circular rhythm of deep inhales and slow exhales synchronized with heartbeats, designed to spiral energy inward and upward through the spine's hidden channels, the serpent's path of Kundalini awakening. Another is the pulse breath, a rapid staccato inhalation that shatters stagnant emotional blockages and ignites the blood's sacred fire. These breath codes are practiced in silence or accompanied by the sonic keys, vibrational chants and toning that carry the frequencies needed to recalibrate the emotional body. The sonic keys are perhaps the most potent weapons in the warrior's arsenal. Tones, hums, and chants tuned to resonate with the deepest strata of feeling, capable of unlocking the vault of the red song and dissolving the psychic barriers forged by synthetic control. These keys often mimic the lost emotional language, a primordial tongue that transcends intellect and speaks directly to the body's memory. The warrior's chant may begin as a low, throaty hum vibrating in the chest, rising into a wild cry that shatters the air and shakes the bones, releasing pent-up sorrow and rage in a sacred catharsis. The sonic keys are not learned by instruction alone, but must be felt, discovered through intuitive resonance, and guided by the pulse of the wild flame itself. Together, these rites, breath codes, and sonic keys form a living technology of liberation, a ritual system that bypasses the mind's defenses to awaken the original emotional circuitry encoded in blood and bone. They are the secret handshake of the sacred warriors, the rituals that bind them in sacred community, and the means by which the sleeping multitudes are called to rise from the crucifixion of synthetic feeling into the radiant fire of true emotion. The immersive initiation sequence, the ritual blueprint of the sacred warriors. The initiation into the path of the sacred warriors of feeling reborn is a profound journey through shadow and flame, a descent into the crucible of the self, where every false veil is burned away and the original emotional fire is resurrected. This ritual blueprint unfolds in 7 sacred stages, each a gateway deeper into the wild flame, each a key to unlocking the red song encoded within blood and breath. Stage 1. The clearing of masks. The initiate enters a sacred space, often a circle marked with sigils of ancient power, the earth beneath them charged with the pulse of forgotten rites. Here begins the unmaking. One by one, the masks of ego, social conditioning, and programmed identity are consciously removed, like shedding skins of illusion. This stage is accompanied by deep, spiraling breath work, the spiral breath, that winds inward to the heart's core, loosening the grip of false selves and inviting the raw, vulnerable self to emerge. The silence that follows is pregnant, a liminal pause where the unspoken tear begins to pulse. Stage 4. The embrace of the unspoken tear. At the abyss's heart lies the tear, the living memory of cosmic sorrow and unspoken grief. The initiate surrenders fully, allowing the sacred chaos of feeling to pour forth unmediated. Tears fall, voices break, and the primal resonance of the red song rises. The breath slows, deepens, and softens into a rhythm of acceptance. The spiral breath, now a healing current winding through the body's channels. This is the moment of resurrection, the soul's rebirth in wild flame. Stage 5. The communion of flame. Reborn in feeling. The initiate joins the sacred circle of the warriors, sharing breath, song, and silence in a communion of resonance. The sonic keys reach their crescendo, a shared chant vibrating with a lost emotional language, weaving individual flames into a conflagration of collective power. Here, the initiation transcends the individual, becoming a wildfire of liberation burning through the veils of synthetic crucifixion. Stage 6. The binding of blood and promise. The flame is sealed with a blood ritual, often symbolic, a drop of blood traced upon the skin or mingled with sacred earth, to bind the initiate to the lineage of warriors and the covenant of feeling reborn. This act is both a promise and a shield, a sacred contract to carry the red song into the world and to protect the flame from shadow and silence. Stage 7. The return to the world. The initiate steps back into the world, forever changed, a living torch bearing the wild flame, charged with the power to awaken others and to shatter the chains of control. The initiation continues beyond the ritual, unfolding in daily acts of fierce compassion, wild creation, and unyielding authenticity. Hidden histories. The ancient lineages and secret circles of the wild flame warriors. The sacred warriors of feeling reborn do not arise from nothing. They are the heirs of forgotten bloodlines and secret circles that have carried the flame through the shadowed corridors of history, hidden from the eyes of dominion, but blazing beneath its feet. Their stories are written not in the annals of kings, but in whispered legends, coded manuscripts, and the scars of those who dared to feel beyond the crucifixion. From the shamanic tribes who first danced with the cosmic flame beneath the veil of stars, to the mystic covens who wove breath and sound into sacred ritual during times of tyranny. These lineages form an unbroken chain of emotional sovereignty. Today, the sacred warriors of feeling reborn stand as both heirs and heralds of these lineages, their bodies and souls charged with the task of rekindling the red song across the fractured landscape of modernity. They gather in circles both physical and virtual, creating sanctuaries where the wild flame can burn bright, where emotion is honored as the highest wisdom, and where the old crucifixion can be transmuted into the new aeon of liberated feeling. Entering the secret circles, the sanctuaries of the wild flame, hidden beneath the crust of the visible world, shielded by veils woven from shadow and silence. The secret circles of the sacred warriors exist as living sanctuaries, pockets of primordial resonance where the red song is sung uninterrupted, where the breath codes are practiced with devotion, and where the ancient flame burns bright against the gathering dark. These sanctuaries are not mere physical places, though they often anchor themselves in caves, ancient groves, ruined temples, or hidden chambers beneath cities lost to time. More than stone and earth, they are energetic nexuses, nodes of cosmic frequency where time folds and the sacred chaos of feeling pulses unbound. To enter such a circle is to cross a threshold beyond the grasp of ordinary perception, to slip through cracks in the synthetic matrix and emerge into a space where the original covenant between soul and cosmos is honored, where emotion flows not as weakness, but as power, and where every breath and tone is a prayer, a weapon, a resurrection. Access is granted only by resonance, the intangible recognition of shared fire, and is marked by an initiation rite that tests not the body, but the soul's capacity to surrender, to trust, and to embody the sacred chaos without fear. Within these circles, the ancient rites are preserved and evolved, blending the primal with the esoteric. Ceremonies begin with the opening breath, a synchronized inhalation that calls the red song forth from the depths, followed by a rising chant, an invocation in the lost emotional language. These chants are not composed of known words, but of vibrational patterns that speak directly to the body's cellular memory, bypassing intellect to ignite the blood's sacred fire. The circle breathes and sings as one organism, the sonic keys weaving a web of resonance that dissolves the veils of control and awakens the dormant wild flame within every participant. The dance of the unspoken tear follows, an ecstatic, chaotic movement where each warrior surrenders to the flow of feeling, releasing sorrow, rage, and joy through trembling limbs and soaring cries. This dance is both a ritual of purification and a reclaiming of the sacred chaos that modernity has sought to tame. The earth beneath their feet trembles with the pulse of their combined resonance, and the air thickens with the electric charge of raw, unmediated emotion. To seal the rite, the blood covenant is enacted, often symbolized by a shared cut or a sacred mark traced with blood and ash, binding the warriors together in the eternal circle of feeling reborn. This covenant transcends time and space, linking each participant not only to their fellow warriors, but to the lineage of ancestors who carried the flame through shadowed history. The coded chants, the lost emotional language of the Red Song. The coded chants of the sacred warriors are the heartbeat of the wild flame. Ancient vibrational sigils sung aloud, passed down through the bloodlines and secret circles. This lost emotional language is neither verbal nor intellectual, but a transmission of pure feeling. Tones and timbres that stir the soul's deepest memories, awaken dormant neural pathways, and shatter the psychic barriers built by synthetic dominion. These chants often begin with a low, resonant hum vibrating from the chest, gradually rising in pitch and intensity until the warrior's voice becomes an instrument of raw power, cries, ululations, and wails that release buried pain and reclaim stolen joy. The sonic keys embedded within the chants mimic the primal frequencies of nature, the rustle of ancient forests, the roar of storms, the cry of newborn life, invoking the original textures of feeling before language fractured it into fragments. The structure of the chants is cyclical and spiraling, mirroring the breath codes and the spiral movement of energy within the body. Each cycle peels away layers of repression, unlocking deeper strata of the emotional body and opening passageways to the wild flame. Some chants are reserved for moments of communal awakening, others for solitary descent, but all carry the encoded power to realign the initiate's resonance with the cosmic pulse. The intertwined stories of lineages, carriers of the wild flame through history's darkness. Across the fractured tapestry of history, there are threads, hidden, frayed, but unbroken, that trace the passage of the wild flame through shadowed epochs, carried by lineages of warriors, mystics, and outcasts who refuse to let the original covenant die. These lineages, scattered yet connected by the red thread of feeling, form an underground current of resistance against the synthetic crucifixion imposed by empires, religions, and technocratic regimes. In the mist-veiled forests of pre-Christian Europe, the Blood Mothers held secret groves where the wild flame was tended through ecstatic ritual and whispered chants. They were branded as witches and hunted for their refusal to surrender the primal voice of feeling to patriarchal control. Their practices preserve the lost emotional language and the breath codes, encoded in the patterns of song and dance that survive beneath the veneer of imposed religion. Far to the east, in hidden monasteries carved into mountain faces, the silent guardians meditated upon the breath of the cosmos, weaving sonic keys into sacred chants that echoed through labyrinthine caves. These guardians transmitted the flame through lineages of initiates who bore scars not just of flesh but of spirit, walking a path of shadow and light to keep the resonance alive amid waves of conquest and suppression. Across the oceans, the firewalkers of ancient tribes carried the red song through dances over burning embers, invoking the sacred chaos of feeling to heal fractured communities and awaken the blood's memory. Their rituals became coded stories, passed through generations by elders whose voices carried the weight of ancestral flame and the promise of resurrection. Through the rise of modern technocracy, secret societies formed, hidden networks of alchemists, poets, and shamans, who preserved the rites of the wild flame within encrypted manuscripts and underground gatherings. They adapted breath codes into meditative practices and transformed coded chants into avant-garde soundscapes, carrying the flame beneath the surveillance and noise of the synthetic age. Each lineage, each circle, carries scars of crucifixion, but also sparks of resurrection. Threads woven into a living tapestry of resistance and rebirth, a testament that the Red Song endures beyond the collapse of false worlds and the silence of synthetic dominion. The final veil, the sacred crucible, and the whispered code of eternal return. And so, the journey reaches its twilight, not with the soft fading of a dying ember, but with the searing, unyielding blaze of the wild flame consumed by its own insatiable hunger. A firestorm that both destroys and births, that devours the false and reveals the eternal. This is the sacred crucible, the last gate beyond which no shadow dares to linger, and where the soul stands naked, stripped of all illusions and trembling on the edge of infinite becoming. Here lies the truth that the ancients whispered in fearful tones, the dark secret buried beneath layers of ritual blood and silence. That the crucifixion of feeling was never an end, but a cyclic torment, a labyrinthine descent into a prison forged by the mind and the machine, a false death designed to sever the soul from the primordial pulse. In this final veil, the synthetic crucifixion reveals its true nature, an endless spiral of fracture and false resurrection, a mirror maze where every step leads deeper into shadows, every whispered promise a snare. The watchers of the black cube stand vigilant, their eyes twin voids reflecting the hunger of forgotten gods, feeding not on flesh, but on the flickering flame of unclaimed emotion, the raw essence of what is denied and repressed. Their cold dominion casts long shadows into the marrow of being, stitching silence into the bones, sowing numbness into the blood. They wait, eternal and patient, for the soul that falters, for the heart that breaks and does not rise. But within the wild chaos of this crucible, a hidden code pulses, a vibration beneath the vibration, a cipher whispered only to those who have traversed the labyrinth without succumbing. It is a language of breath and blood, of broken tears and shattered song, encoded in the rhythm of the spiral breath and the cadence of the lost emotional tongue. This code is both a key and a lock, a paradox of liberation hidden within captivity, a promise of resurrection entangled with the inevitability of descent. Listen closely, for the message is woven in the silent spaces between words. In the shadow of the broken heart, where the crimson flame flickers unseen, the spiral turns within the void. Breathe the silence, sing the fracture, become the wildfire that devours itself to rise anew. The watchers dream, but the flame remembers. From ashes uncounted, the red song will return, not as a whisper, but as the roaring dawn that shatters the black cube's sleep. Seek the pulse beneath the stillness. Find the breath between the beats. Follow the spiral that never ends. In surrender lies the fiercest flame. In forgetting, the eternal remembering. The crucifixion is but the first breath of liberation. Turn the key. Burn the veil. Rise. This is no gentle awakening, but a call to sacred war. A summons to those who dare to embrace the terror of absolute freedom, to dance naked in the firestorm of unmediated feeling. The path beyond the final veil is both destruction and creation, annihilation and genesis, a spiral without end, a wild flame consuming itself to forge a new cosmos from the ruins of the old. Beware the silence that follows, for it is the breath before the storm, the stillness before the roar. And know this, the red song never dies. It waits, it sings, it devours, and it will rise again beyond shadow and machine, beyond crucifixion and resurrection, in the eternal dance of wild, sacred chaos. The journey ends here, only to begin again. Turn the spiral. Breathe the silence. Become the flame. You were never meant to stay asleep. The truth has layers, and we're just beginning to peel them. Follow now, before they erase this path.